Hi everyone, welcome back to Asperger's from the Inside. You're here with Paul. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. This week's video is on the topic of mental health versus emotional health, and I'll be covering three key things in this video. So firstly, what are they? How are they connected and interconnected, but also how are they different? Secondly, what does that mean for how we treat our emotional and mental health? And finally, what can you do about it? If you would like to improve your emotional health or improve your mental health, there are some really practical things that we can do to achieve that. So to start off with, I thought I'd share a really brief story around why this issue is so important for a lot of autistic people. And it has to do with masking and expressing emotion and repressing emotion. So when I was younger, I learned from the social world around me that my emotions were wrong. I was upset when I shouldn't be upset. I was laughing when I shouldn't have been laughing. I just seemed to react in a way that was negatively conditioned by the society around me. I was eliciting bad reactions when I shared with people how I was feeling, when I responded intuitively to what was going on around me. And the message that I internalized around that is that my emotions must be wrong. My emotions are inappropriate. The best thing to do is to control them, to suppress them, to add a layer of conscious intervention so that I don't just respond straight away. I actually go, no, I'm not going to respond. I'm going to think about it first. I'm going to decide what the appropriate response is, and then I'm going to respond. And this sounded like a really good strategy. It sounded like, great, I have amazing self-control. I can react however I like. I don't get perturbed by situations too badly. But essentially, it was masking my true self, and it was a big barrier to authentic social connection because I wasn't authentically myself. I was massively filtering who I was and my reactions. So eventually, I realized that has quite negative side effects, as we'll see later in terms of good emotional health. So firstly, what is emotional health and mental health, and how are they interconnected but different? So mental health is more to do with what are your thoughts? What are your beliefs? What do you believe about yourself? What are the stories that you're telling yourself intellectually about your own life and your own situation? Now, those stories can be helpful, or sometimes those stories can get in the way. Emotional health, on the other hand, and our emotional life is more about our physiological state. What is happening in our body? How do we feel about it? And how does our body react to that? And how are these two things interconnected is because our physiological state affects our brain function. If you think of things like polyvagal theory, when we are scared, it changes how we perceive the world. All of a sudden, things around us are more likely to be threatening. We stop looking for signs of positive social connection. We stop hearing things and we start focusing really narrowly on what we think is important because there's a lot of danger around, for example. So there's a huge amount of interconnection here. And traditionally, the psychologist's approach to this is to say something like, emotions are generated in our brain. Emotions come from our brain. Thoughts create emotions. Therefore, we will employ something like talk therapy to find out what you're thinking, find out what your beliefs are, and we'll work in that field to help you with your emotional life. There's a really great book called The Upward Spiral by Alex Korb that really explains this interplay very, very deep in a very detailed way, how one thing leads to another thing, and we can actually start to put ourselves on a different trajectory, even by a tiny little thought. We can start feeling better. Thinking positive thoughts sounds dumb, but it actually has a pretty big effect. However, that is from a mental health perspective, from what I'm thinking and the stories I'm telling about my life. From an emotional perspective, a good way to understand emotions is like a flow, like a river, right? If we start blocking them, then they build up. The pressure builds up. They need a release. They will either start leaking in funny ways that we don't have control over, or the pressure will build up and build up and build up and build up until we can't physically control it anymore, and it will come out, explode in something like a meltdown, for example, when we get completely overwhelmed and lose the ability, lose the control that we had previously. So ironically, having the ability to control your emotions, as I did, as I still have, can lead to the problem of I always control my emotions until the point that they get so big that I can't control them anymore. So we talk a lot about emotional regulation, and we don't talk enough, in my opinion, about emotional expression and how that contributes to emotional health. So what does this mean for how we treat our mental health and our emotional health? So if the problem is with my thoughts, with my beliefs, if the problem is in my head, then we might use a treatment, something like talk therapy or something like medication, to help my brain function in a different way. Whereas if the problem is that my emotions are not flowing as they should, then that puts a completely different perspective on the kind of things that I might do to help that situation. If my emotions are not flowing out, what I need to find is a healthy expression of whatever's inside. Sometimes the first thing that comes to mind is not necessarily a healthy expression of emotion. There are plenty of negative ways to express anger, for example. There are also a lot of very healthy ways to express anger. Physiologically, in an emotion, our bodies are actually in a different state. They work in a slightly different way. And when we do things, when we physically go and act, whether that's by venting to someone else or using our muscles in intense exercise, for example, just to name a couple of examples, it actually physiologically helps us change state, change our emotion from the one that we felt stuck in to a different one. And when we listen to the message of an emotion and act on it and respond to it, suddenly it's expressed, it's released, and we don't have to feel it anymore. Whereas my previous strategy of, I don't like that emotion, I don't want to act on it, so I'm just going to ignore it, doesn't tend to work out so well. Okay, so what can we actually do about it? If we know that emotional health is affected by what we do and how we express our emotions, then it gives us some really simple things that we can try and see if they help. So things like, as I mentioned before, exercise, meditation, journaling, venting to somebody else, finding a way to express whatever the emotion is. There's a reason we teach art in schools, right? Art and being creative is a really great way to express emotions, and expressing emotion is an integral part of the human experience. If we don't do it well, we tend to end up emotionally unhealthy. Other things we could realize is, if I'm stuck in a particular emotion, then an external stimulus could bring me into a different state. Maybe I could read a book, listen to music, watch a movie, have a chat to a friend. And that is a new stimulus, something exciting to focus my energy on that can have a big effect on my emotions. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is create a lifestyle where I regularly have the kind of things that I need to express my emotions on a daily basis. If I get antsy from sitting still from too much, then I want to build into my day regular walks or regular exercise or regular stretch breaks or something where I don't let it build up too much. And it's the self-awareness of knowing what I need that allows me to make those kind of choices in my life. So I should probably sum up there and bring this to a bit of a conclusion. We talked about the difference between mental health and emotional health. Basically, mental health is how we think and the stories that are in our brain, and emotional health is how we feel, our physiological state of our emotions. And yes, they are incredibly interconnected. One can influence the other and vice versa. And it helps to understand which one are we actually talking about. If I'm trying to treat my mental health, I'm going to use different strategies than if I'm trying to improve my emotional health. So this does actually give us lots of practical things that we can go out and try. If you're interested to find out other ways to improve your mental health, you can check out my video on 4 ways to improve your mental health. As some of you know, I'm actually an autistic life coach. So life coaching is another extremely powerful avenue of getting professional help. It's all about looking at your own goals and your own beliefs. Sometimes changing and realizing one little tiny belief can make a huge change to your actual life. In terms of emotional intelligence resources, you might want to check out my resources at emotionsexplained.com.au. The main thing there is an EQ 101 course, which is a self-guided course that you can do in your own time, completely online. So I might leave it there. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.